Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'll be taking a look at Jaywalk Comics number 2. This is Domino's books, but I believe that this is still coming to me from Floyd Tangeman and the Dead Crow crew. I think Jaywalk was a collaborate. Yeah, this is edited by Floyd Tangeman. So I think that Jaywalk Comics is a collaboration between Domino, and that's why when I got the first chunk of this stuff from Dead Crow, I thought they were coming from Domino just because I had had some communication with Austin English and had ordered some different stuff from him already. Now I'm realizing that first batch had been sent to Sean by Floyd, and so thank you both times for sending these along, Floyd. Really appreciate it. So this is another anthology. I'll go through and show all the stuff in this one because I thought there was pretty cool stuff in each one of these. They're a little bit longer, a little bit less artists. Some of the Dead Crow stuff can have so many artists that it gets hard to keep up with, like who's done what page, and so I get a little bit more lost in those, in terms, not lost in the reading experience, but lost in terms of making sure everyone gets credit when I'm doing the videos. So anyways, this one is by Good Boy Evil, this little piece here. The front page didn't do much for me, but as soon as I turned to the story and saw this like grid overriding everything, and the grid getting smaller and tighter and making the values more intense, I immediately started to kind of get the point. I thought this like system, this constraining system, and the character's looking at the TV and he's being advertised to, and there's this story about life and death that kind of comes through it, good and evil, all of these things. And I really like that the style, which is entirely made out of grid lines except for the outlines of the characters and their hair and stuff, adds this imposing structure on the story where it seems like the impositions of society is the grid that these characters are kind of trapped in and bucking against. So even though there's no words and the imagery is kind of vague, and then this last, like, you win, like this whole life is a game, and it has this structure to it that you're kind of bound to, and you can maybe choose which grid you want to play on, but you're still stuck with the grid. If you think outside the box, you're trapped in one, as MC Paul Barman, one of my favorite rappers, would say. So this has that sense to it. Like if you think you think outside the box, you're trapped in one. But like always bucking against it. It's a bit Foucault as well, right? Like you'll never be able to see out of your episteme. Sorry, I'm going like hardcore philosophy there all of a sudden, but these guys bring me back to my time in Berkeley because they're all from the Bay Area. So well, I don't know about this one because it's a collaboration, but I know the Dead Crow crew is. So it has that sense of Foucault too. Like you're always trapped in some episteme, and you can't force yourself out of it. So like history has to get you out of it, and then you can see it in the end. But there's a sense of trappedness to it. This is Max Burlingame. I really like Max Burlingame's art and just his power as a storyteller as well. Like this, again, this same kind of grid thing. I know they're two different stories, but also worked out really well to put these two one after the other, these two artists. It was a good editorial choice, whoever put that there, I'm assuming Floyd, to go from this dark to the medium and then to the stippling with the light while maintaining those same building structures, and also this sense of like the vertical nature, almost like the sun is rising. It adds this verticality to it. So I think that's formally just really beautiful comics right there, along with just this awesome cross contour, cross hatching style that Max Burlingame has shown in other works as well. There's this scene right here. I do think this is a younger group of artists. I'm sure that just has that youth kind of underground Bay Area thing to it. Let me give you some advice, Leon. You know, I was your age once, full of passion. You think you've seen it all, want to reinvent the wheel before you understand how it spins and why. And that's like the constant battle between youth and old age, right? And I mean, when I was living in the Bay Area at 25 to 27, I was much more engaged in that rebellious wanting to tear down the whole system. And then, yeah, as you get older, you really have to maintain a certain type of lifestyle to not get sucked into this a little bit more. Like, yeah, okay, you start to see those structures that are holding you in place, that there is no getting out of them. And so the first step is like, well, I'm just going to learn to be a leech within it. And then you get in it a little bit too much and you start to have too much at stake, and then you kind of become this, and it's, I don't know if it's a lie to yourself or if you really are just understanding something about the world that people just don't get when they're young, or maybe it's just you're rationalizing to yourself that you've given up that aesthetic, but you start to have more at stake, and so you start to get this sense that yeah, I've seen all the attempts to rebel against it. And within that, with going through that, I've learned what the system is, and then I went and tried to blow it up from the inside a little bit, and actually saw some of the value in it. And so I think that's the statement that's being made here. But also, like, I would have never listened to anyone saying that kind of shit when I was young either. And I would look at myself now and be like, you fucking sold out, they got you. So I don't know, it's just fun. It's fun to look at this kind of stuff. This one here by Tuck and Roll by Jesse McManus, really like the cartooning in it. Reminds me a little bit of Max Huffman. This seems to be autobiographical, about something that happened when he was a youth in '93. So that would put him maybe 10 years younger than me, but not as young as I assume a lot of these artists are. And he's asking about the new issue of Bone, which I really like. So really like the art in this one. Story, it's just an interesting little piece from when he was a kid. Sam Siegel's been on a lot of the other ones. Really like the pencil style that he uses. Story, this is just this very strange story about a radiator wanting to be a building. So that's why a lot of these is like, I don't know what they're trying to say with the stories, but it doesn't matter. These cool wood blocks. This one's really beautiful. Teresa Panyawi, I think is how you pronounce the name. The poetry in this one added up to something for me. Usually poetry is kind of a barrier for me, but this right here, this looks like San Francisco with the streets just going up forever and the Chinese style building at top. So it brings back memories, but also the poetry in this one really spoke to me, and was talking a lot about trying to find yourself, which I think is my sense of the struggle that most of my students are going through. And again, I'm coming from now, 2 generations removed probably from the current generation. And I look at the narrative around identity that's going on in our society, and it has what this is describing, where you're kind of just fluid, right? Everything's always fluid. You're constantly making it up. Like, we know that basically identity is this narrative, and the narrative is influenced by social factors, but also, you build your own narrative. And so there's this sense that I think as a society, we've lost a sense of stability of identity. I did a piece of writing once where it was like, it will be coming out in the Abolition of Man hardcover collection, actually. This, I don't know when this video will come out, but we have the Abolition of Man hardcover collection coming out in June of 2023. I'm sure this will come out before then, but it has a piece of writing I did when I was much younger, and I was describing what I saw as the problem in the way that we're talking about identity these days. It used to be that John was a farmer who had 3 daughters, and there's that sense of like John is the identity that persists through the changes. And now it seems to have shifted to where, those changes are the identity. And that, as far as I can tell with my students, has left a lot of people constantly obsessing about that and really struggling to have any grounded sense of who they are. And I don't know, like, I think reestablishing that sense that it's not a pure tabula rasa, like every chalkboard, every blank slate has its own grit, right? Like, so this idea of a blank slate is silly to me, because a slate is not a perfectly smooth surface. It has to have grip to it to accumulate the chalk. And I think in the same way, we do need to establish that there is some core personality to which all that other chalk sticks. So no one's a blank, or yeah, we are blank slates, but slates each come with their own particular quality. And I really do see a lot of my students struggling because they've been kind of taught that it's their job, their burden to constantly be reforming themselves. And one of the times that became clear to me is I was teaching for a year at a university in Virginia, and I was having a conversation with one of the professors, and that was probably right when, like, what's termed Gen X, we hadn't come up with the name with it yet, but the characteristics of that generation were starting to show in 2015, 2016. The value set of them were starting to grow, and people were looking for a word. What is this new generation? And he said that he had heard the suggestion, the becomers, that instead of Gen X, they were the becomers. And that has always felt exactly right, that the burden that has been placed on these kids is this philosophical idea of constantly being given the burden of becoming. At every moment, you're kind of making yourself, and that there was no base starting point that you can launch from. And if you have nothing to launch from, how are you supposed to jump, right? And so that, I really feel that, like, in the way this artist is talking about, no personality remained concrete, always shifting like wind. I exist only in moments, like my identity was in constant motion. Or, well, I'll start here. I want to find myself. It's always felt like a curse to have so many different sides to myself. Like my identity was in constant motion. No personality remained concrete. Always shifting like wind. I exist only in moments. Always becoming, right? The becomers. And maybe it's just the old guy in me that's like, the 90s when I was a kid was so like individualistic, like you just really wanted to stand out as this unique individual, but there was some kind of like solidity to it still. Maybe as these people have shifted, that's just the old man in me reacting to a generational value change and wanting to say the new thing is unhealthy, where the way we were doing it was better. There was definitely unhealthy shit about what we were doing too. Look at all my reviews of Dan Klaus's 8-Ball, right? But having that more nuanced view of there is some stable thing. It's a pretty simple thing, but you're born with it, and that is you, and then you evolve. Like, I'm not the rebellious kid I was when I was in Berkeley. The younger me would think I was a sellout, so I'm a very different person, but I'm still Carson. I am the thing that persisted a bit, or I'm at least that blank slate that had its own texture that grabbed chalk in a different way. So I think there's some middle ground thing there between the two views. One seems like a reaction to the other. And I hope as society gets back to finding that middle ground, that you won't get artists like this, because it's sad and it pains me. And I see it in so many of my students. And as being a teacher, it's your job to care about these people as they move forward in life. And if they're constantly just focused on the burden of becoming, it's really hard for them to be successful. And so that's where my reaction to it comes. I know that's probably going to be an unpopular opinion with some people, but I see it every day affecting people negatively. So I don't know what the solution exactly is, but my suggestion is rethink the blank slate idea a little bit. And then you have Ashton Carlos, whose work is always very beautiful to me, but the writing is just this real free flow stuff. So with Ashton's stuff, I usually check out of the writing. He's at least got really nice handwriting, unlike some of the other people. But like here with the production on this, I can't even read some of it. I mean, I can, but it's a real struggle because the values get similar and the writing gets small back there and things like that. Also, what I've seen of a lot of Ashton's work, I wonder if some of this was in color. There's obviously collage materials and stuff, so his work does usually work better in color. Obviously, this is a sketchbook, so this is something that's been printed in newsprint on black and white, and I think maybe I would have a little time getting a hold of it. But even the words start to get more banged up, and this is really orderly here, and then this is more banged up and busted around. And it has that sense of automatic writing poetry to me, but the visuals are stunning. I always love the visuals of the Ashton Carlos stuff. So that's Jaywalk 2. Thank you so much, Floyd, for sending this along. Obviously, I found a lot of rich content in this one. Love these anthologies, seeing what younger artists are doing, how they're pushing things, where they're calling back to the past, how they're building up something new, based on a lot of precedents that once I realized what those precedents were, the work made a lot more sense to me. So very cool. Thank you, Floyd. I hope people go grab these. This one especially, this Jaywalk Comics, these newsprint jobs. I don't see a price on it, but I imagine they're $5 or $6. I think that's what I saw on one of them. So please go out and support what these artists are doing, support what this group of artists is doing. They're obviously passionate and pumping out a lot of stuff, and they deserve the support for that. If you enjoy what we're doing here on the channel, there's two ways to support us. One is through our Patreon. We have a couple different tiers of exclusive content on there, some voting rights, things like that. The money we get from that goes back into buying the books that we review, so we just try and put that back into the pockets of other creators, and that helps us expose their work, so we really appreciate that. And then the best thing to do to support Living the Line, and the mission of Living the Line is support what Sean's doing with Living the Line Publishing. So we'll go ahead and take a look at one of his projects now. The Exile by Eric Creek is a gorgeously illustrated Viking saga of revenge. Eric Creek calls it his Viking Western. It's about a guy who's been away on the warpath and is returning home to some family troubles that have to be resolved. And this is told in just this amazing, like, kind of 3-color art style that looks like old woodblock cuts or something. It's absolutely gorgeous book that you've got to pick up. Thanks for following along. Take it away, Jeff.
You want to see all these books? Smash that subscribe button and the like button and the bell, and then you get them.